At the far edge of a lonely coastline stood an old lighthouse that had watched the sea for more than a century. During the day, it looked almost ordinary, a tall stone tower covered in salt, its windows dark, its walls scarred by years of wind and rain. But when midnight arrived, everything changed. The lighthouse came alive. Every night at exactly 12 o'clock, its enormous lantern turned toward the ocean and began sweeping a pale beam across the black water. Sailors in nearby villages had noticed something strange about it. The lighthouse was supposed to rotate every few seconds, warning ships of the dangerous rocks below. But at midnight, the light stopped following its normal pattern. It always paused, and every time it paused, it pointed toward the same place far out at sea. No one knew why. The lighthouse had been abandoned for nearly 20 years. There was no keeper. No electricity had been connected to it. No maintenance crew visited the island. Yet the midnight light continued to shine. People called it haunted. Others believed an old lighthouse keeper still lived inside. But no one was brave enough to find out. Until Daniel arrived. Daniel was a young filmmaker who traveled from town to town, searching for forgotten places and unexplained stories. When he heard about the lighthouse, he immediately became interested. The old fisherman warned him. "Don't go there after sunset," one of them told him. Daniel smiled. "Why?" The fisherman stared at him for several seconds before answering. "Because the lighthouse isn't watching the ships." Daniel frowned. "Then what is it watching?" The old man looked toward the dark ocean. "The sea." That answer stayed in Daniel's mind. A few days later, he rented a small boat and crossed the rough water toward the lighthouse. The sky was grey, and heavy clouds covered the moon. As the boat approached the rocky island, Daniel saw the tower rising above the cliffs. It looked taller than he had imagined, and somehow lonely. He climbed the stone steps and entered through the rusted door. Inside, everything smelled of dust, salt, and damp stone. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. Old maps covered the walls. A thick layer of dust covered the control room. Daniel switched on his camera. "I'm standing inside the abandoned midnight lighthouse," he whispered. According to local stories, the light still turns on every night at exactly 12. He walked deeper into the building. On the wall, he found a collection of old photographs. Most showed ships, but one photograph caught his attention. It showed the lighthouse keeper standing outside the tower. Behind him was the ocean. Daniel looked closer. Written beneath the photograph were 4 words. He saw them at midnight. Daniel's smile disappeared. He searched the lighthouse for more information and eventually found an old journal hidden beneath a wooden floorboard. And there, hidden between the waves and cliffs, he saw a narrow stone staircase descending into the sea, a staircase that shouldn't have existed. At the bottom was a dark doorway, and standing beside it was a man. Daniel recognized him immediately. It was Elias Ward, the lighthouse keeper from the photograph. But Elias had disappeared 20 years ago, and now he was standing on the rocks beneath the lighthouse, staring directly upward at Daniel. Then Elias raised one hand and pointed toward the ocean. Behind him, something moved in the darkness. Daniel's camera continued recording, and the final image captured before the screen went black was the face of Elias, whispering one sentence: "It's coming back." Chapter 2: The Secret Beneath the Waves. Daniel didn't sleep. For the rest of the night, he remained inside the lantern room, staring through the glass. The strange lights had disappeared. The ocean looked normal again, but the staircase beneath the lighthouse remained. At sunrise, Daniel climbed down the tower and searched the cliffs. He found no staircase, no doorway, no footprints, nothing. It was as if the entire thing had never existed. But Daniel knew what he had seen. He returned to the room where he had found Elias's journal and began reading again. The final pages were almost impossible to understand. Elias described an old legend passed down among sailors. According to the legend, the lighthouse had not been built merely to guide ships. It had been built to watch something that lived beneath the sea. Long ago, sailors claimed that strange lights appeared beyond the cliffs at midnight. Ships that followed those lights disappeared. The first lighthouse keeper discovered the truth. The lights were not guiding ships. They were calling them. So the lighthouse was built on the highest point of the island, and every midnight, its beam was directed toward the ocean to keep the mysterious lights away from the shore. 4 generations, the keepers maintained the light, until Elias became the final keeper. According to his journal, Elias had noticed something terrifying. The lights were getting closer. Every year, every month, every night. And eventually, they began appearing directly beneath the lighthouse. Elias believed the lighthouse was failing. He wrote that if the light ever stopped watching the sea at midnight, whatever lived beneath the water would come ashore. Daniel looked at the date of Elias's final entry. 20 years ago. The same year Elias disappeared. Then Daniel noticed something strange. A small handwritten note had been added beneath the final page. The ink looked newer. It said, "Someone must keep watching." Daniel stared at the words. Then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. No one was there, but the lighthouse door slowly opened. Wind rushed into the room. Daniel stepped outside. The ocean was calm. Too calm. Then he saw something floating near the shore. A wooden box. He climbed down the rocks and pulled it from the water. Inside were several old photographs, a rusted key, and a folded piece of paper. The paper contained a map. It showed the lighthouse. Below, it was a hidden passage leading beneath the cliffs. Daniel realized the staircase he had seen during the night had been real. He followed the map. Behind a wall inside the lighthouse, he discovered a loose stone. He pushed it. The stone moved. Behind it was a narrow passage. Daniel turned on his flashlight and entered. The tunnel descended beneath the lighthouse. The walls were covered in strange markings. Some looked like waves. Others looked like eyes. At the bottom, Daniel found a massive underground chamber. In the center stood an old machine connected to the lighthouse above. It was not powered by electricity. It appeared to be part of the original lighthouse mechanism. The machine was designed to control the lantern. Beside it was another journal. This one was written by Elias. Daniel opened it. The first sentence was simple. "I finally understand what the lighthouse is watching." Daniel continued reading. Elias explained that the strange lights were connected to something beneath the island. He had discovered an underground chamber where the original lighthouse. Builders had carved symbols into the stone. They believed the ocean contained an ancient force that appeared whenever the moon was hidden, and the night became completely dark. The lighthouse beam wasn't meant to illuminate the sea. It was meant to remind that force that someone was still watching. Then Elias wrote something that made Daniel's hand shake. The lighthouse does not protect the ships from the sea. It protects the sea from what is beneath it. Daniel slowly looked toward the darkness beyond the chamber. A low sound echoed from somewhere beneath the floor. Boom. He stepped backward. Boom. Dust fell from the ceiling. The ocean above seemed to tremble. Then the old machine suddenly began moving. The lighthouse was approaching midnight again. Daniel checked his watch. 11:52 p.m. He understood. The light had been operating without a keeper, because the mechanism was somehow still alive. But tonight, something was different. The machine was slowing down. The lighthouse was failing. Daniel ran toward the stairs. He climbed as quickly as he could. Outside, the sky had turned black. The wind screamed across the cliffs. The ocean began rising. At exactly midnight, the lighthouse light turned on. But this time, it didn't sweep across the sea. It remained still, pointing toward the horizon. Daniel looked through the lantern room. The pale lights appeared again. Hundreds of them. They covered the ocean. Then the water began moving. Something enormous rose beneath the waves. Daniel couldn't see its entire shape. He only saw a vast shadow stretching beneath the surface. The lighthouse began shaking. Daniel remembered Elias's words. Someone must keep watching. He grabbed the old control lever. The mechanism resisted. Daniel pulled harder. The beam moved. Across the sea. Again. And again. The strange lights began disappearing. The enormous shadow sank. The waves became calmer. But one final light remained. It was directly in front of the lighthouse. Daniel stared at it. Then a figure appeared beside the light. Elias. The old keeper stood. On the water as if the sea itself had become solid beneath his feet. He looked toward Daniel. And smiled. Daniel heard his voice inside his mind. Thank you. Then Elias disappeared. The final light vanished. Silence returned to the ocean. When morning came, the lighthouse was dark. Daniel left the island carrying Elias's journal and the photographs. But he never published everything he had recorded. Some things were too difficult to explain. Years later, fishermen still tell stories about the old lighthouse. They say that on quiet nights, when the clock reaches midnight, a pale beam can sometimes be seen sweeping across the sea. No one knows who operates it. No one has ever found another lighthouse keeper. But sailors who pass the island at midnight say they feel strangely safe when the light appears. And sometimes, just before the beam disappears, they see a figure standing inside the lantern room. A man watching the ocean, waiting, guarding the sea, and making sure that whatever lies beneath the waves never comes back. So if you ever find yourself near that lonely coastline after midnight, remember the old warning. Never follow a light you see floating on the ocean, because some lights are meant to guide you home, and some lights are watching to make sure something else never finds its way ashore. If you enjoyed this mysterious lighthouse story, make sure to subscribe to Whispering Walls for more forgotten places, haunted buildings, dark legends, and mysteries hidden inside the world's oldest structures. Turn on notifications, because the next story may reveal another place that was never meant to be discovered.